We might be on introduction part 37. We don't know.
Yeah.
We'll see how it goes.
No, we can't do that. Bisexual lighting.
You're listening and you have thoughts and you want to share them with us. And we love that.
Oh, sure. Put me on the spot. Why don't you?
Susie sells seashells by the seashore.
No, she doesn't.
Because it's going to be great. And I think you're going to enjoy the heck out of it. Welcome, everybody, to Write Out Loud, the podcast about storytelling and writing and just becoming the best author, writer version of yourself that you could possibly be, right? My name, of course, is Matt Cassim, and this, alongside me, is the lovely and beautiful and amazing
Christina. I don't know why I always sing the song, Matt.
I don't know, but I love it.
Gotta stop doing that because I'm not a singer.
No, don't stop doing it. It's okay.
I think I'm
Don't
Oprah. I
stop.
think that's what it is.
Believe.
She always sings song stuff.
That is true. That is true. That is true. Well, listen, this episode we've decided to call Why Are You Not Writing? Wait, what are we calling it?
Why aren't you writing to your potential?
That's right. Yes, yes. I forgot. I'm sorry. Okay. But I think I have a question for you.
Yes.
The question is this. Why are people so easily influenced, do you think?
I think the number one reason why people are easily influenced is because they don't have confidence in their own abilities. They don't have the confidence, and rightly so, especially if they're just starting out.
Sure.
These other people, by golly, must know better than me. So they look to others for guidance and advice.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. I think because you think about it, like we're looking for people who have walked the path before, right?
Yeah.
And especially if they've had success, you look at them and you go, gosh, they must be, I mean, they're good. They've got millions of books that they've sold. They've sold millions of albums. They are movie stars.
Yeah.
Like I should just do what they do because it's working for them, right?
Right. But just because it's working for them doesn't mean it works for you. I think the thing that we always forget is that creativity is very personal. And creativity comes from inside, and that's where you're starting from. And if you keep going outside, you're not at your creative best, I guess.
Sure. Well, it's like the Judy Garland quote, right? Like, don't be a second-rate version of someone else. Be the first-rate version of yourself.
Exactly. There's a reason I love Judy.
I know. She's so good. She's so good.
Yeah. And she's great. And actually, is it Judy Garland or is it Audrey Hepburn? I think it's been attributed to both, actually, because now I think what the quote is, Audrey Hepburn said, "Why be a second rate of Julie Garwood when I can Garland?"
Garland, yeah.
God, Garwood. No, Julie Garwood is on my head. Julie Garwood is one of my favorite all-time historical romance authors. So that's where that mental slip up came in. No, no, but it is absolutely 100% a fundamental in this business. Do not be a second rate anybody else when you can be yourself. Because that's what we're missing in the writing world. We are missing someone who has had your experiences, your writing ability. Even at the beginning, there is something that we are missing. You are meant to tell your stories and not somebody else's. But I think
in your voice.
Yeah, in your voice. But I think we're going to take this episode a little bit farther than just be your own voice.
I thought we were done.
No.
I thought we were just like, listen, be yourself, everybody, okay?
Yeah, be yourself. That's the message tonight, and end of story. No, there's a lot more to this than just be yourself. We are going to take it a step further and tell you how to gain a little more confidence in your own abilities and how to embrace what works for you throw out all the rest.
I love it. Are we saying really that they should not read any books by these experts or authors that have been famous and successful before them? Are we saying like, no, just don't listen to any of them? Don't even read any of them?
No,
No.
absolutely not.
No.
You can listen all you want, but the point of difference I'm speaking to is don't take it as gospel. Don't take it as you have to do it this way. Finding your own way is difficult if you don't have guidance. So hearing how other people do it, you can go, that's a great idea. But then put it to practice and see if it works for you. You know, I think in this business, I used to do several years ago before the pandemic, and I keep thinking maybe I should get back to it. I used to have this workshop that was pretty much all about figure out who you are as a writer. And that just doesn't mean the content that you're writing. This means what time do you write best? Okay, schedule yourself for that time. How do I prepare for that time? I have a client that I actually just spoke to today, and she started telling me, oh, I used to do this and I used to do that. And I'm like, why did you stop? It was working for you. And that's actually what we did today was she is going to write me an email tomorrow after she completes her tasks because she has a pre-ritual and a writing ritual. And she really needs to stick with that because that's how she writes best. Even though it's something that she says other people would think was weird, but it works for her. So who cares how weird it is? If it works for you, stick with it.
Yeah. I love that. I think too, when we talked about doing this episode and I started looking at the research on just what are the experts saying, right? What's some of the major kind of themes around the advice that they like to give out? And there's a list here. I mean, there's a list of just start, like just write badly and just start, discard cliches, listen and observe, like eavesdrop and observe strangers and try to create compelling characters out of that, right? Beginnings matter and da, 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 da. So there's this whole list. But there's one in particular that struck a chord with me. And that was follow the headlights, allow room for surprises and let the story reveal itself. And I thought that to me is just so fascinating, right? So for me as a writer, that's something that I would latch onto because it's not necessarily telling me how to do it, but it's saying, consider this, right? Consider this approach and all of that.
But you know what? What it's telling me, an author, coach, and expert, there's something for you there because you latched onto that one more so than the rest. That tells me that maybe you aren't leaving enough room for spontaneity in your stories. Maybe you're sticking too close to what you planned and are not allowing room for surprises.
Which is even more ironic considering I'm a pure pantser.
Oh,
like I really, truly.
Okay. So
just so funny.
Again, hearkening back to that client I talked to today, which actually in my client call, I actually said, this is what we're talking about on the podcast tonight. So she actually is very meticulous and routine driven. And so all of those things you would think adds up to she's a plotter. No, she's totally the opposite. She is such a pan. Today we were actually talking that she works best when she has no idea what's happening next and is working on the current chapter, and only then can she see into the next chapter. But if it works for her, why not embrace that more? So for you, I mean, same thing. If you think you're a pantser, then maybe lean more into the pantsing. Maybe you're not doing enough pantsing. Maybe you do need to do like her and just know what comes next in the next chapter. Just plot out the next chapter right after you finish, chapter 1. Okay, what's happening in chapter 2? And then leave that for tomorrow. You come back to it tomorrow and you go, this is what I said was happening in chapter 2, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do something different. Yeah. No, I think I think that's great advice.
Which is also really funny, I think, for you when you consider the fact that throughout this podcast, I've been the one saying, let's see, I need to have more structure. I need to have more of an idea of how this goes. And yet I'm like, when I'm writing, that's not the case whatsoever.
No.
It's just funny. So it's very much in line with your client, right?
Yep.
There's certain aspects of us that deal differently.
And maybe when you get that structure in other areas, that makes you feel secure enough to go be wild and crazy in the creativity.
Sure. Could be.
That could be.
Yeah.
I do think.
It's just funny.
Yeah. No. I think so too. And in fact, it took us a while. I mean, this is book number 7 that we're working on.
Mm.
And so neither one of us recognized that before she started working on these struggles that she was having.
Sure.
Another client I want to bring up simply because she's kind of the one that sparked the idea for this podcast, because she hired me more for the coaching side than she did the writing side. And the reason was the first session we had together, she was talking about all these experts and saying, well, I tried to do it this way and I tried to do it that way. And I read this book and I read that book. And like there was a stack of books she had talked about writing, but yet she couldn't sit down to write chapter 1 because she kept trying to fit into a mold. But you have to do this, but you have to do that. And I finally said to her, throw away all the books, throw them all away. Don't buy another one. Because we really had to figure out exactly why she kept falling into this hole of trying to do it their way.
Mm-hmm.
But when we really sat down to it, it freed her. It freed her from any parameters of having to do this and having to do that. And now we are in the practice of writing, where she's practicing how she does things. She's figuring out who she is as a writer. She's figuring out what things are stopping her in addition to, because I think the real issue with her is that there's underlying things with that creativity that are stopping her. So, but we couldn't find that out until we could get rid of the books. For her, getting rid of the books was freeing. I'm not saying that's what's right for everybody. Again, the way I work in many ways, including in my business, but in my personal life too, I will listen to the advice of everyone and then figure out what works for me. When I have a huge moral dilemma, do I break up with this guy? I will listen to all my friends, but I still have to make the decision for myself because I'm the one living my life. And that's the same way with creativity, and especially writing, because I really do feel this is something that I truly believe in, is that every writer out there that wants to write, that has this desire to write enough to start. If you don't have enough desire that you haven't even started, if it's unlike this client that hired me to figure out why she can't start, that was huge. She's spending money on a author, coach, and editor without a book. So that told me right away, she's got a huge desire to actually do this. So if you're that person that, I don't think I'd ever spend money on an editor, maybe you're not a writer. Yeah. But my point is that if you truly are at the computer and writing stories and trying to figure it out and doing it, then listen to the advice that's out there, but only take what works for you and throw the rest away.
Sure. I think it goes back to the lack of confidence and lack of trust in your ability as well, that sometimes people, not everybody, sometimes people get stuck in the learning mode.
Yeah.
Which is just a form of procrastination, right? Because they think, gosh, I'm not quite ready yet. I have to learn more because there's just more stuff that I don't know. And I'm not ready to write yet until I know whatever that is, when there's not really an end goal. They're hoping some magical acorn knocks on their head and goes, oh, here it is. And now that's their inspiration and they're off to the races. But it's really, there's safety in learning because you're not actually doing.
Yes. That is so true. Oh my gosh. That is the proverbial, I'm better off not even trying because I could fail. Well, you're failing by not even trying. You've already failed. You're actually, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy then.
Yep.
So so you really do have to give kudos to every single person who is trying. This is This is my absolute favorite, Brene Brown. If you are a client of mine and listening to this, they're all going, oh my God, okay, here we go with Brene Brown. Because it's not the critic who counts. It is not the critic who counts. It's the man in the arena. Now, I know Brene Brown didn't say that, but she's actually the one that brought it to our generation. It is from Teddy Roosevelt, a speech he gave called, and they labeled it The Man in the Arena, because it really is that I am not going to take criticism from you when you are not in the act of doing. So this is all those book reviewers who have never written a book, who are panning somebody because of X, Y, and Z. And I would say 90% of the time, reviews all are opinion and not really a critique.
Sure.
That is my opinion. But
it's true. I think it is.
Yeah. And the thing is, the critic who doesn't actually count is the one who's actually stopping you from following your dream because you're afraid of what they're going to say. Well, guess what? They don't matter. They don't matter. Who matters are those people that you are going to reach with your book, with your song, with your TV show, with your whatever. And it's not just, oh, I've got to write the great American novel. No, I grew up on romance novels. And I'm sure there's someone in the audience rolling their eyes and going, oh, she's going to talk about romance novels. But you know what? They taught me a lot about people because those are character sketches. Those are at the heart of them, character-driven stories. There can be some plot-driven ones, but then I would argue that they're more, plot-driven mysteries or whatever with the romantic elements. But the ones that are really romance-driven are about relationships and characters. And there is somebody out there who is going to read a book and be like, I see myself in that character. And that character can make it through to the end. So maybe so can I. So I think there's a lot of things that we miss when we get caught up in our own, as you pointed out, lack of confidence. That when we don't start, we've already failed. So as you said, or actually it was Nora Roberts who said, but you said early in the podcast about the just start, wherever you are, just start. Yeah. Nora Roberts has a quote, and I'm going to get this bungled, so I'm just going to paraphrase, but attribute it to her. I can't fix a blank page. You can't. You can't work on, and the thing is, a lot of people get caught up in that blank page, and the blank page is important, but guess what's more important? The idea that you can revise. The idea that you can edit. So it doesn't matter what you put on that blank page because you can always go back to it. That's why, for me, if we're talking marketing 101, that the most important thing you can do is write a good book. Well, in order to write that really good book, you gotta edit. You gotta revise. You gotta do those things.
Gotta start in the first place.
Yes.
Yep. I love it.
So
you were telling me another story before we started too about one of your clients. Why don't you share that?
It's not actually a client. I would love for her to be a client. And actually, more importantly, I would love for her to be on the podcast. So if you're listening out there, or if somebody who knows her maybe passes along that we are talking about her on this episode. Her name is Scarlett Cole, and I am a fan. I'm actually a fan of her work, and I've read a lot of it. But that's not what I'm going to talk about. I'm actually going to talk about something that she posted in a group that one of my clients, I think that's what you were thinking of, one of my clients forwarded to me, because she knew I would be interested in it, because she just talked about a lot of what I talk about, in that you've got to do what's right for you. And she is someone, and she brought up this word pivot, and I'm going to call it the grand pivot. So Scarlett Cole, if you are listening, come on the podcast for an episode that we've already titled The Great Pivot. But her important pivot was realizing that after, I think it was 8 years of writing full time as her job, that she was bored. And that if she went back to work part-time in a job that she loved and actually admitted missing, that she actually discovered that she wrote better. There were a lot of other things that she talked about, but the important thing is she knew herself. And I'm telling you, there isn't a person out there that's going, this woman is crazy. She was making money full-time writing. Why didn't she stick with it? Because she was a better writer when she had this other stuff going on. Now, I don't know her personally, so I can't speak to exactly what it was that shifted for her, other than she did say in the post that she shifted from writing in third person to first person, which I'm telling you, at some point in her career, she was probably told third person sells more and better. And at that time, it was probably true. I don't think that's true today, because I think it sells as equally. I think it comes down to writes a better book. So someone maybe does write a better third person book than they would a first person. But maybe Scarlett Cole, when she flipped and wrote in third person, she discovered something hidden inside of her. Maybe it was that confidence that we were talking about earlier that just said, you know what, this is my natural voice. I'm going to pivot slightly, pun intended, to Kristen Ashley, because while we're talking about first person versus third person, she is someone I constantly talk about, because New York did not want her because she wrote her books in first person. And she got rejected for a decade. I don't know. Kristen Ashley, come on the podcast and tell us your story. So I don't know how long she was rejected from New York, but eventually self-publishing happened. And man, has she made a career out of self-publishing. Okay, get this, audience. Listen to me and listen carefully. This woman makes money. I don't know how much. I can guess. She at least makes 5 to 6 figures a month on her writings. No joke. No joke. And she writes her books in first person point of view for the female character and third person point of view for the male character. Now, you tell me in what X person telling you how to write would actually say 2 points of view, first person point of view and third person point of view, makes for a great book. No. Guess what? It works for her voice. It works for her voice. I am dropping money on a book she releases knowing that I might get that first person, third person point of view, but it works for her. It works for her.
Sure.
Do I think anybody else could do it? Maybe, but probably not, because this is what works for her. This is where her voice comes out. So pivot, pun intended, again, back to Scarlett Cole, because there's an important point that I want to make. When she made this pivot from third person to first person, now I'm getting confused. First person, writing that first person either A, brought a new magic to her writing, B, going back to that part-time, field that she was in, giving that its energy, giving her books her energy. She could be dividing her time and going, okay, it is time to write and let me write. And she was very disciplined about it, obviously. But at the end of the day, she herself has said, I am making more money. Yes. Listen again. She went back to a job, left the full-time writing to go back to a job. And I'm not talking about the money she's making on that job. I'm strictly talking about the book. She's saying that she is making more money on those books now. And she's not doing a lot of marketing. Again, this is just stuff I got from the post. If I am wrong about any of this, Scarlett Cole, come on and correct me. If I'm right about this stuff, Scarlett Cole, come on this podcast and let's talk more about it. Because I think it exactly illustrates the point of this podcast. When you are able to do what works for you, take in all the advice, take in Scarlett Cole's advice. Do you need that part-time job back? Maybe that gives you the drive to focus on your book for those 2 hours every night that that's the only time of day that you can write. Or maybe you're writing on your days off, from that said part-time job. But doing what works for you is going to not only fulfill you, it is going to give you the confidence in your own abilities. And yes, I do believe at the end of the day, it's going to make you more money.
Yeah, absolutely. All because you stay true to yourself, because you find out
Yes.
what works for you.
Yeah, because that feeds into the creativity. It's just like I've said before, when you're blocking your creativity, you get in the shower and you're doing something mundane and suddenly inspiration hits you and you're like, where's my paper and pen? This is another thing that feeds into your creativity. When you figure out how you work, then all of a sudden you're excited to come to the desk every day. All of a sudden you are excited to go, you know what? It's the weirdest thing, but I have to do this before I write. Who cares if it's what gets you excited in your writing? And the thing is, I do believe this is something that I don't know that anybody's talked about before. And I'm about to show some of my freakish flag. I believe that what you are feeling when you are writing, readers can feel when they are reading what you wrote. And if you are excited to come to the story, even though it's this weird, bizarre story, I think the reader's still going to get it. They're feel it. They're going to, wow, this is a great book. Oh, I loved reading it. I enjoyed it so much. And it was because you enjoyed writing it. And
It's because you enjoyed writing it. It's because you put your heart into it.
Yeah, you put your heart and soul into it.
Yep.
And if you're struggling, and literally, what is that quote? And again, I don't know who to attribute it to, but you put your fingers on the keyboard and bleed. That's what they say about writing. Whoever this is it Hemingway or somebody? I don't think that's true. I don't think you should be bleeding at the keyboard. I think your joy should be at the keyboard. And no, you're not going to get to that joyous place every single day. And no, you shouldn't stop writing, because remember rule number 2, you can always go back and fix it. So if you come to the keyboard that day just with motivation, get your words in, because when you revise, when you edit, that can all be fixed.
Yeah. And that was one of the things too that I had found, right, as I was doing my research, was just keep revising. Like you can always go back and change it. And you can always make it better just by giving it a little bit more attention, another once over, another set of eyes.
Yeah.
Like, don't be afraid.
And this is for another episode entirely, but you should have at least 3 eyes on a manuscript, no matter what. Someone who is doing developmental editing and someone who is doing copy editing, because that copy editor, if you have yourself or your developmental editor, myself, I tell my clients up front, I will not copy edit. My eyes have seen that manuscript too many times. I am going to miss every single boo-boo mistake because I'm concentrating on other things. I'm concentrating on characters, and I'm concentrating on plot holes and things that need to be fixed first. And then if you hand it back to me to copy edit, I'm going to miss everything because I've seen it all before. And and I know one writer who actually has said she has 3 editors, I believe. And a lot of people use beta readers, but again, that's for another topic of conversation. But yeah, it is about revising. I think every manuscript, no matter how good you are, I don't care if you're Stephen King, you need to edit that at least twice. So you should be at your 3rd draft before it goes to a copy editor.
Sure.
And that's because the first draft is you telling yourself the story. The second draft is fixing everything you need to fix after you told yourself the story, and now you know where the story is going.
Yep.
And then the 3rd draft, you can hand off to a copy editor.
Yeah. It's your first draft, again, is your lump of clay.
Yes.
Your second draft is the formed piece before it goes into the kiln.
Yeah.
And the 3rd draft is really, you've now painted it, made it look more beautiful than ever.
And the thing is, before it goes in the kiln, you may have to reshape it a few times. until this is what I want to produce.
Yep.
You could take 5 drafts. I have a client who I believe we're on our 3rd draft, and I know it's going to take at least 1 or 2 more. But he's telling a very complicated story. And so we've got to work at it bit by bit by bit. It's not easily one and done. It's complicated. But that's okay. Layers is good. Layers is good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was looking again at the list of things that I had found, and one of them that's intriguing to me, but is not one that I would choose to pursue because it doesn't work for me, is sound it out. Pay attention to the rhythm and sound of your writing.
Yeah.
And it makes me think about Aaron Sorkin, because Aaron Sorkin, if you've ever heard the West Wing Weekly podcast, they talk about this a lot, especially when Dule Hill is on as a guest. He talks about the fact that when he played Charlie in the West Wing, he got the scripts and he very quickly realized, oh, this is just jazz. Like this is tap, right? There's that to it. And he's like, once he figured that out, he did not have to show up nearly as much or as often because he could nail it much more effectively, right? So he was able to kind of clue into that because he's also very musically inclined. Me, I love music. I love listening to music. Can't, for the sake of my life, make a song or write or do any kind of like instrumentation, right? So for me, even though I find that appealing and interesting, if I were to say, well, I have to do that because this is what the expert's telling me to do, like I would fail at that. That would not work for me. My story would become disjointed. It would become just not its full potential because I'm choosing to pursue a piece of creative writing advice that I think is what is needed to make a good story. And it just doesn't work for me.
Yeah. And again, that comes down to knowing your own ability. I don't know that I would be able to write a cadence, a rhythm into a manuscript. But even thinking one of my long-term clients, probably my longest term client that I've had over and over again, she writes descriptions so poetically that it's magical. I don't even know if I could compare her to anybody else. And that's actually something that, working with her pretty close to the beginning of her career, where we kind of had to pull out, but it's done this way. No. We need to go back to your voice, to your abilities. And she's magic. She's absolutely magic when she leans into that, because nobody else does it like her. Nobody.
Sure.
So yeah, discovering who you are as a writer is definitely top of the list for when you start out, or even you could be in the middle of your career. Maybe it's not going so well. Then you know what?
Sure.
Pivot.
Pivot.
In the
Pivot.
Yes, in the language of Chandler Bing.
Ross.
Well,
Ross from Friends.
But Chandler was with him in the stairway.
Yep.
Pivot.
Yep.
And joked about it. Anyway, yeah, if you can then pivot back to who you were when you were happiest writing and when you were writing your happiest stories, and and you could be writing the most depressing story, but you have to be excited about writing that depressing story. And you really have to be who you need to be as a writer to get that book done. There's some obscure, like only 1% of writers actually finish a book. Something like that.
I believe it.
I would have to look it up, and I don't want to do that for the sake of time in the podcast. I know we're running to our end here, but yeah, it's a small amount of people that actually finish a book. And I think the major reason why they don't is because their lack of confidence in their own ability to do so. That they forever stay in that mode of learning and forget to learn how they work. So in your exploration of how do I write, go to how do I write, not how do the experts write.
Right. Or what do they tell me I should do in order to be this writer,
Yes.
to be the successful writer, to do
Yes.
just like them? Because
You know, this
that's what we
writer
do.
makes $1 gazillion. So if I just follow what they do and their advice, I will make it too. And that's
It has
not
to
the
work
case.
for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. Nope. Not even a little bit.
So why aren't
Well, very
you
good.
writing your best? Yes.
Yeah.
That's
I mean, this
the
for
reason.
you listening, this is the thing to think about, right? Why aren't you writing your best? Is it because you're stuck in that learning mode because it's safe and it's comfortable, right? You're in your little clamshell. Is it because you're taking too many directions and you're not really sure? Because at some point you get analysis paralysis,
Yeah.
right? Is it just because you are afraid to fail? That's okay. Lots of people are afraid to fail, but failure is where the learning is.
Yeah.
So get out there and do it.
Failure is where the learning and the experience comes in. I bet you if you asked that gazillion-dollar author where they were in the beginning, they're going to tell you they failed a lot and they learned a lot.
Yep. So be courageous. Just do it. Just get out there and do it. See what happens.
Yeah.
You might surprise yourself.
You will surprise yourself. There's no might about it. You will surprise yourself.
Well, very good. Well, I think that's where we can leave it.
Yeah.
And I would just invite you, as you're listening to this, any thoughts, questions, comments that you have for us, give us a shout out. You can send it to Christina at bookmatchmaker.com. You can send it to Matt at writeoutloudpod.com. Either one of those is going to get to us, and we'd love to hear it. Or better yet, go to the website and leave us a voicemail. There's a little button. You click it, you speak your mind, and it comes to us. And you might hear yourself on the podcast. You never know. But we'd love to hear what you have to say about this, because this is a topic that everybody deals with. No matter how successful they are now, they dealt with it at some point. Well, very good. Thank you, my dear. As always, fantastic, fabulous, and amazing. Any last words for?
Last words. Yeah, I think the best thing that you can do is listen to all the advice, take what works for you, throw the rest, and get to practicing the writing.
There we go.
Yeah.
There we go. I will just say ditto.
Ditto. I like it.
I'll just say ditto. I agree. Awesome. Well, that's where we'll leave it. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Hey, thanks so much for listening to the podcast. We really hope that you're enjoying every bit of it, but we would love to hear your feedback. Drop us an email either to Matt at writeoutloudpod.com or Christina at bookmatchmaker.com. We would love to hear your thoughts. What's working, what's not working, and what do you want to hear more of? Thanks so much. We really appreciate it.